Hi, it's Chris Moore with Senior Remodeling Experts. Welcome to Aging in Place is a Team Sport. It's a video series where we talk to different providers. We explore how families, professionals, and communities can come together to help older adults live safely, comfortably, and independently at home. I'm here to guide you, connect you with the right resources, and help make the rest of your life the best of your life. Welcome back to Aging in Place is a Team Sport. And I'm excited to have with me today Ryan Salmon. And Ryan is joining us all the way from the great state of Alaska. And Ryan's story is unique. He has been involved in the team sport of aging in place from at least 3 different professions. He's the first person that I have talked to that I can say has that claim to fame. So I'm really excited to have you here, Ryan. If you would tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in aging in place, and kind of the roles you've played endeavor.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to share. I guess my educational background started in teaching. I got a K through 12 PE degree, physical education. I loved sports and I love working with kids. But a big part of me was kind of adventurous in my early years, and I traveled and kept going west and north from Minnesota, where I grew up, and ended up in Alaska. And part of that work that I did was, after doing some kind of fun, adventurous stuff in the tourism industry, was working with people with disabilities, and had a good time doing that. I'm really focused on working with people in the home one-on-one and supporting them in their daily activities. This is before I even knew what occupational therapy was. And it wasn't until an OT was working with one of our mutual clients that told me, "Did you know that you were doing occupational?" And that was kind of a wake-up call. My wife and I were both at the time working for the same nonprofit as a direct service providers. And she was also encouraged. We were both encouraged to become OTs. It wasn't until a few years later, after we started a family, I got into construction. I've had kind of a background in construction since I was in high school, on and off throughout my life. Did I decide, after we had one kid and we had another one on the way, to go back to school? We don't have an occupational therapy program in Alaska, so we traveled to Oregon. I applied to Pacific University, and I have family near there, so that was the only place I applied. And spent 3 years there. I got my doctorate in occupational therapy, and we moved right back up here against a lot of people's suggestions, because we live in a small town. And typically, when you become a new grad, or you jump into the field of therapy or any medical profession, you probably want to work, in a bigger institution where you have a lot of supports around you. And I jumped right in, both feet, worked for a private practice where the work was basically handed to me. I had a little bit of training, but it was like, all right, you're going to be the OT in this village school, this borough school, and you're going to see kids or people in the community. So I guess fast forward, I worked here in Haines, a little town in Southeast Alaska where we live. And then I did a little bit of traveling. I would get on a Alaska Marine ferry, which, if you're not familiar, how a lot of us travel around here. It's either that or a bush plane. I would take a ferry to Juneau, Alaska, the capital, and I worked at Bartlett Regional Hospital, and I did some inpatient, outpatient, some group work with kids with disabilities, primarily teens on the spectrum. And then I did that for 2 years, and I would get on that boat and go and work for 3 or 4 days and ferry home and be home with the kids and family. And that was a good experience, but not something I wanted to do long term. So I eventually started contracting and in Juneau with a hospice and home care company. And then I made the transition back home and started my own private practice. And that was very similar to what I've been doing before, working with the school systems and in the home community. So that brings me to about 2023. But at that point, I felt like I needed a change, or I needed to kind of break open the box. I've always been an out of the box thinker and doer. So I wanted to combine the two, right? That construction background and my OT sort of skill set and lens, which was kind of my specialty when I did it anyways. I always addressed the environment. That's what we were trained to do, but I felt like that was kind of my specialty. And so I kind of broke free. I started doing part-time construction and doing little small jobs in our community, helping in the aging in place world and then consulting. And yeah, and then I ended up starting my own, starting my actual consulting business, which I still have to this day. But in my own sort of life and struggles with financial stuff, we weren't taught a lot in school about how to really manage money and work with money and know how money works. I've gone through my own journey over the past year, essentially every day. It's kind of my new passion or obsession to learn more about it. And that led me to my new field of work, which it's new for me. So I'll admit that I'm not 100% seasoned expert in it.
So, and your current vocation is in the financial arena, and it's interesting because I have a aging in place planning guide, and it talks about 5 core areas of aging in place, which are housing, healthcare, finance, transportation, and community and social interaction. And if a person can kind of have those 5 core areas handled, the chances that they can have a successful and happy experience aging in place are greatly increased. And so, in listening to your story, you've been in housing, you've been in healthcare, you've been in finance. So, all you got to do now, Ryan, is start a transportation company that ferries people in rural Alaska to, social and community interaction, take them to, Anchorage to see a play or something. And you've got the whole thing all in one.
Yeah,
All in one
no,
lifetime.
I, yeah, I am not going to be the one to arrive in knowledge. I imagine I'm just going to keep evolving and adding on. But I have learned along the way that you can't do it all at once. And so, I mean, yeah, technically the financial world too is what I noticed or a big trend when consulting with people or talking with people about aging places, as you probably know very well, is that a lot of people don't prepare for that. It's something that they are much more reactive to, right? And there were a lot of barriers for me as a licensed occupational therapy, doing virtual cross state lines, the red flags of credentialing or, being licensed in each state that you provide the service. So, but yeah, and it's wild what the Social Security Department says is that only 5% out of the population will be financially secure. That's not financially independent, by the time we retire. So I think it's something that we really need to focus on. And yeah, enough, I never thought I would be in the financial world. I think my mindset, I grew up with a teacher and a social worker for parents and parents, a good upbringing, but we are rich in love and not in money. And that was just like flat statement. Boom. It was just like, that's the mindset that I had growing up. So, it's a little side note.
Well, I think there is a very strong undercurrent that says, and usually it won't say it out loud, but that there's piety in poverty, and that money is the root of all evil. And if, somehow being poor is a virtue and being rich is a vice. And certainly, money is not the answer to all life's problems. And having content and being happy with who you are and having good relationships and at the end of the day, laying your head down on your pillow and being happy with what you've done that day are all more important. But all that being said, all else being equal, it's way better to have a little money in the bank than it is to be broke.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And money is it's a measure of value, and if we provide value in the marketplace in a way that people recognize, they're going to compensate us with money. That's how our financial system works. And so to feel embarrassed or ashamed that we're working for money, at the end of the day, we're providing for our families and we're taking care of our obligations in a way that provides value to the marketplace. And I think one of the things to me that's inspiring about your story is that you continue to grow and you continue to learn and you continue to look for ways that you can provide value to people in a way that will meet your needs as well. And I'm curious, what principles and parallels do you see between the construction and the OT work and the financial work when it comes to helping people stay in their homes? What are the principles that weave through all three of those?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the construction that I've done over the years has really been beautifying homes. I'm installing and fabricating and customizing people's homes so that they look and feel better, right? But I think there's a lot to the safety and accessibility, obviously. It's something I always addressed before because I did a lot of flooring, right? And so any of those little transitions that you put in, you really want it to be smooth for anybody passing through. Um, I mean, the occupational therapy work and what really came to mind this morning, and in some ways, it's kind of like the pressure of something that builds for me, creates the most beautiful ideas, right? So this time with you and getting out of my comfort zone and speaking on screen, um, brought back my occupational therapy roots, which really come from simple models of practice. And the one that we and I just stuck with because it was the easiest is the PEO model, or it's also known as person, environment, occupation. But also there's a second P, and that's performance, because that's OTs we're all about doing, right? So we're human doers rather than human beings. And so our goal is to help people to live their lives to the fullest in every way. The environment has always played a huge role in that. And there's multiple facets of the environment where obviously there's the physical environment, but then there's temporal, meaning times of the day that we use parts of our environment, seasons. There's also the virtual environment, which we're all very, very familiar with now, right? Social media and all of this amazing communication availability. But the one that came to mind this morning was the financial environment. And it's opened my eyes to the idea of how that model can work in all facets. Typically, as an OT, we're looking at the whole person, which just doesn't just look at them. It also includes their caregivers or their family members and so on, and goes beyond. But if I narrow it down to, say, the financial, can look at the person. It's a simple model, kind of like the Olympic symbol, where there's three circles, right, that overlap. There's the person, which you can think of as their mindset, going back to mindset, their beliefs and values, and maybe some of their skill sets around money and how to budget, for example. And then the environment would be more of where do you put and store and invest that money that you have or that you gather over time. Whether it be, do you have credit cards? Do you have CDs? Do you put your money in a 401k? Do you have a savings account? Is it in a shoebox, under your bed? And then there's the occupation, right? So what do you do that brings in money? And typically, hopefully, it's something that you're passionate about, that you're bringing value to the world, like you said. And really the idea of those three circles is how much overlap can you create? How much can that environment support the person, the environment, and the occupation support each other? And that overlap, I guess, could represent financial health or financial calm or financial independence or just freedom, you know. And it brings up the idea too that when it comes to, money is the root of all evil, but really it's the love of money, right, is the root of all evil. And it's just
one step further than that, what the scripture actually says is that the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. In other words, when people are trying to get the money without doing the work to get it, then it tempts them to do all kinds of evil. And, I believe in a model of be, do, and have. First, we become the person that can do the thing. Then we do the thing. And then when we do the thing, then we have the result. And that's the natural order. And it's very interesting that you have the three intersecting circles, because I use a very similar model when I talk about aging in place in general. I talk about the person, which is their abilities, their limitations, their physical, cognitive, and sensory impairments, if they have any, their finances, what they bring to the table. Then the place, which is their house, and is it accessible? Do they have too many steps or narrow doorways, slippery floors? They have all that. And then their support network, which is can be family, can be friends, can be professional caregivers, can be professional medical people. And it's at the intersection of those three that we find the best solution. So it's very similar to the idea. So I think that's the principle that we look at of where the realms intersect, that we look for solutions.
No, I love that. I love that. Yeah, well, it reminds me of the COPM model, which has it's similar with the circles collecting, but it has an overarching circle that, that has that support system around them. But then there's another circle that's more macro, like, their community in there and so on. So yeah, I love that. But, yeah, I mean, and going back to the money thing, it really is all it is a means of exchange, right? So money for food, food for money for car for money for service for money. And that's, going down the financial literacy kind of rabbit hole has really been helpful for me to understand that. And it really led me to a strategy that I'm now teaching that really helps people gain back control. And we can go into that later, but yeah, curious to
Well,
know
yeah, no, tell me about that strategy, because a lot of the the financial advisors or financial instruction, if you will, that you see in the marketplace um, tends to all follow kind of the model that you work for a lifetime and you put back some of your earnings and you put it all in a big pile, and then you stop working and stop making any income, and you hope that that pile of money lasts as long as you do. Some variation of that is typically what passes as financial advice from most of what I see in the marketplace. And the statistic that you gave, 5% of people arrive at retirement in some kind of decent financial shape, tells me that that model is not working very well for most people.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
tell me what you've learned and what you're helping people with.
Yeah. So while I was doing my research, right, I'm reading the books, a lot of the common books that people will jump on, Robert Kiyosaki, Tony Robbins, Psychology of Money, and so on. I somewhere down the line, I don't know exactly how I found it, but it was a concept that has been around for a long time. And it's a strategy that, the wealthiest families have done for generations, banks, corporations, they all have this as one of their underlying or foundational, speaking of just, the construction of their finances, that it's a foundational concept. And it's very much about, and it's something that you don't have to be wealthy to do. You just have to, number one, start by understanding that one of the first principles of the laws of wealth is that we should be saving about 10%. And that's what, a lot of us maybe have been told or understand where the money, people will put that into 401k, right? Maybe get a match by their employer. They'll put in a Roth IRA, DD, high interest savings accounts. And yeah, a lot of those were created to support the individual and their families. But yeah, it's not a form that is very liquid that you can actually use. It's more of a storage, get it later, like you said, once you retire. So what I learned, it basically came down to one book, but I've read quite a few books around the subject, is a book that taught me that the importance of not only the profession that you do that brings in money, right? That you have passion and love about, brings value to the world, but the business of banking. And it's that the fact that we are all in the business of banking, whether we know it or not. And, we put money into a bank account, and I'm not putting down banks. We need them, right? To have that exchange of money in our culture, in our society. But we rely on them pretty heavy to take our money and put it into their system where they have the ability to loan it out. That's how they make their business run. It's money in motion, makes more money. The fractional reserve banking system, right? So they have the ability to take $1 and loan out 10. And so, a good resource to look at to kind of get this number wrapped around your head is that banks make approximately, or in the average of 400 to 1,300% on every dollar that you put in there. And that's, you can check that out at bauerfinancial.com. Um, they take your money, they loan it out. Maybe they give you a 4% interest, right? You have this nice high interest savings account. They loan that out for 6% to a car loan or whatever. That person takes the money and puts it right back into the bank, and they loan it out to, uh, somebody to pay off credit cards or small business loan or a mortgage and so on. And it just cycles back and comes in and back and in. And that's how they make the money. And the idea or the strategy that I've learned is about taking back that control of the banking functions in our life by essentially creating our own bank, not in the literal sense, but with a vehicle that we have here in the United States and in Canada that is the most optimal vehicle to use to create that kind of a system. And I can get to that when you're ready. It sounds like you did have somebody speak to it in a recent episode, and I could go into more detail about it.
No, 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 tell me, because I think I know where you're going.
Yeah. So the vehicle that I'm talking about is, it's going to be unexpected to you or to a lot of people, but maybe not. It's a specially designed and engineered whole life policy with a mutual company that pays guaranteed interest rates and pays dividends. Mutual meaning you're part of the company, so you are going to get paid dividends very likely, especially if you work with the companies that have been around for a long, long period of time. And a lot of people, what we're taught, right? And I did the same thing, is buy term and invest the difference, right? And I bought term in my early 40s. I'm in my late 40s now because I felt like I needed to be an adult, right? I needed to support my family if something happened. And there's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything bad about term, but whole life is there to support you, not the typical whole life that you can get right off the shelf if you walk down to State Farm Insurance or, your local insurance agent. These are specially designed and engineered where it becomes a place of capital, where you're able to use it throughout your lifetime rather than just building up a death benefit to pass on to the next generation or charitable organization. So, and it really is a simple concept, but there's a lot to it that could give you a long, long presentation on that right
Yeah.
now if you want.
Well, you're exactly right, Ryan. When I bought my first house in my late 20s and realized that the mortgage company would offer you mortgage insurance, but I did a little reading and found, well, the mortgage insurance really protects the mortgage company. It doesn't protect you. And I had an older man who I went to church with at the time and who I respected, and he told me that he belonged to an organization called A.L. Williams and that they taught, buy term and invest the difference. So I bought a term policy that would cover the mortgage on the house if I were to, something were to happen to me, and to cover my income, take care of my kids. Really, all of my life, this was my late 20s. I'm 63 now. All of my life, that was my belief: buy term and invest the difference. That whole life insurance was a bad financial vehicle that you should stay away from. And you are the third person in the last 3 or 4 months that has come along and said that, that belief is not necessarily the correct one. And it's quite interesting how, these things happen. And one of them was Garrett Gunderson, who wrote a book called What Would the Rockefellers Do? And it's all about how the Rockefellers have maintained their family wealth, whereas other families like the Vanderbilts have not. Their and whole life insurance, properly funded, fully funded, properly set up whole life insurance is part of that. When that kind of paradigm shifts happens, it makes you wonder, what other beliefs maybe am I holding that ought to be challenged, right? because you brought up the banking. We have the Federal Reserve. Most people have no idea that the Federal Reserve is a private corporation and is not federal at all, and that the banks do operate on a fractional reserve system, meaning they can take $1 and loan it out 10 times. And most people have no idea that, because I think that's by design, that the powers that be don't necessarily want the average man to be financially literate. And I think that the old saying, what you don't know can't hurt you, is very false.
Hmm. Yeah. And it reminds me of the one that we bring up a lot is it's not what you don't know, it's what you think you know that just ain't so. Right.
Right. What you know to be true that just ain't so. I've heard that too. Right?
Yeah, there's a few different people that I
Yeah.
remember Mark Twain, I think, said it once. But yeah, I mean it's you know, and if you pick up Becoming Your Own Banker, I don't know if you've read that, but that's highly
I
recommended.
have
It's a
not.
short, okay, pretty
Okay.
short. You can get the audio. It's a 91 or 92 page long book, and it comes in an 8.5 by 11 big old thing, big words, pictures. It's great. But he talks about the human side, right? The three principles that he talks about are arriving in knowledge, right? The arrival syndrome that a lot of us have. Whether it's arrogance, or it's been drilled into us so much that that's the way we think it is, and how it's good to keep digging. It's good to keep learning. Always, I mean, just before I got on this call, I spoke with somebody from GFI. They're a bigger company, and they're recruiting agents. So once you become an agent, you instantly get all these texts and emails, and they're trying to recruit you to be a part of their company. They're growing and expanding. But I like to get on the phone and connect with these people, because they're human beings and they have different ways of working in the business, and they have a bigger amount of products that they talk about, and they have a better understanding of stuff that I don't talk about. And so I like to learn from them. But primarily what we are working on to support people is gaining back control. And the idea is, when you set up these policies, there are guarantees, right? You're going to get guaranteed interest. You're going to guarantee, B, you're going guaranteed to pass away. Most insurances are an if, right? Just like term insurance is if you pass away. Only less than 2% of life insurance policies pay out, because the actuaries who understand how to assess somebody's life expectancy are that good. And so, but not to say that term isn't a good, safe thing to have in your back pocket. Yeah, I'm sure I could easily go down a lot of different little rabbit holes in this conversation, but I like to keep it on topic. I feel like I can keep.
Okay. All right. Let me draw a fence around it. Assuming that, all right, let's do a hypothetical family.
Sure.
Okay. There's a family, a husband and wife, and they have 3 kids. And let's say their kids are 16, 12, and 8. And their income is, their household income is $80,000 a year. And they're paying their bills, but they're not really saving anything for their later years. They're not really able to save anything for their kids' education. They're just kind of making it, through their life. And so they call you up and they say, Ryan, we heard that you can help us, with our finances, and we'd like you to come over and sit down and talk to us. What do you say to that family? How do you counsel them to improve their financial situation?
Oh, that's a good. You almost painted my picture. A lot of what I do and what I do, we do not want anybody to jump into anything if they don't fully understand and have both feet ready to jump in. And then once we get working with them, we continue to provide free education. So just to give you a little bit of a background about how I get compensated, to be transparent. Everything that we provide as far as a service is free, and we get compensated through commissions. A lot of people know that agents get commissions. The big difference is, when you're setting up a policy like this, if you set up a regular whole life policy where all of the money that goes in, the premium payment goes into the death benefit. That is where the commission percentage comes out of. We set them up where it's somewhere between 60% to 90% goes into that value that you can use throughout your lifetime. And that is not where you make the commission. So we're actually saving 60 to 90%. But that being said, working with a family, like you mentioned, I would just start the conversation and, and I would see how much they know about the concept that I teach and I work with. And we would just get to know their finances and what their goals are, right? Typically, if you're in a situation where you're not able to pay anything extra, you're 100% paycheck to paycheck, that's where you kind of have to sit back and look at your situation and maybe address, where is money leaking out here and there. And that's where you would do some of maybe the Dave Ramsey style, where you're going to, let's talk about where you can cut costs and save money. Where's the money going out the door? Or sometimes maybe
Or where is there an opportunity to increase our income? Would that
100%.
be like in your case to re-educate yourself and go into a different vocation? Would it be to start a business that maybe you start part-time and build to where it becomes full-time? Would it be, I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can, bring value to the marketplace and increase your income.
I totally agree. And it's like, where can we save and how much more can we bring in more? Right. But
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is when I support somebody, I want them to understand that they can do this without working any harder, without spending more time working, and without taking any additional risk. So, um, there's not a minimum or a max. There is kind of a maximum, but typically the minimum that we would want somebody to contribute to a policy is about 10 times your age. So I'm getting up closer to 50. So I would be 500 a month, right? And anything under that, you can do it, but it's not going to build and compound the way you would want it to really work for your improving your financial situation. If you're only putting in $100 a month, right? Certainly not going to hurt. But the big but is if you're going to start a policy, let's say for a child, and you are just putting in, let's say, 1,000 a year, 2,000 a year over time with these policies, the big advantage with this is all about uninterrupted compounding interest, right? So you're able to get that guaranteed interest rate, which isn't a huge amount. This isn't a get rich quick thing, somewhere around 3.25%. And then you're also getting dividends. And we work with companies that have been around for the one I personally have a policy with has been around for over 148 years. And dividends are not guaranteed, but the company I work with and the other few that we work with have never not paid through all the depressions, recessions, Great Depression, wars, crashes, housing crisis. So they're pretty steady. They're smart companies. And the idea of it is that you also take that dividend that you get every year and you buy additional paid up addition, and that helps it grow even more. And for those who don't fully understand compounding interest, a small $2,000 a year policy that say I could buy on my grandchild in a few years if my kids end up having kids, by the time they retire, could be in the millions, even if they don't use it, to its max. But yeah, so that's and the uninterrupted compounding for those that don't fully get it. It's a great example is like, would you rather have a penny a day that doubles for a month or $1 million? And for those that don't fully get it, they'll say, I'll gladly take the $1 million. But the penny that compounds ends up being $5.4 million at the end of it. So, and the uninterrupted part is, well, what if you had that penny in a savings account and it was doubling, but you were getting a 2% tax or 2%, cut out of it. That little amount that's shaved off every single day throughout that time period cuts it down by millions. Take another 2%, it cuts it in half. So that's the benefit of these policies is where your money sits in there. You can borrow from it and use it for expenses throughout your life, investments, paying off debt, and then you pay the system back, but the amount never goes anywhere because when you borrow from it, you're just collateralizing the amount that is built.
So, are insurance agents licensed by the state or by the federal government?
By the state. So
By the
I'm
state.
like,
So
yeah,
what
I'm
states are you
licensed in
licensed in?
Alaska. I'm licensed in Alaska, and um, I've been just kind of trained that you can pick up the license for most states um, because of I went through the training, I took the exam, and that exam transfers to most other states. So let's say I was going to set up a policy tomorrow with somebody in Missouri. I could get on a website and pay for that state and get licensed. But, obviously I have to stay credentialed, do continuing educations, all that kind of stuff for each state I set it up with. But rather than just going all out and just paying for every state, I plan on just building.
And you are from listening to you, I can tell you're very, very committed to the interaction and getting to know people and not just like getting a website and selling a bunch of policies.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I did do this stuff in person. I mean, I just happen to love where I live, and it's middle of nowhere, and we have about 1,800 people that live here. So I don't think that I can just do it for my local community and make a living doing it.
Yeah. So you said you're in the southeast. So you're along the what do they call that? The Panhandle, right there along the bottom.
Yeah, it's the Alexander Archipelago. It's a fjordland. We have big mountains that shoot straight out of the canal, glaciers all around us, and whales. Yeah, wildlife, moose and bear, and run around our backyard. I go
Wow.
fishing every year and catch all the fish I need, salmon wise. And yeah, it's an interesting life. I grew up in Minnesota and more in the metro kind of world, metro areas.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, Alaska is one of three states that I have not set foot in. So maybe one of these days I'll come see you and you can show me around.
absolutely. Yeah, I hope to have some more cabins for people to stay on my property. So
Okay.
if you
Okay.
come up here, I'll show you a good time, and we'll go fishing and crabbing and sightseeing and whatever you want.
Awesome. So this financial chapter of your life you started when?
I would say just under a year ago, and just kind of self-taught, reading books and getting around the campfire with a lot of people that are putting out content, really good content. I work with the Money Multipliers, and they put out free live events almost every day of the week. Wednesday, they have one that's probably the most beneficial. For Tuesday, take back control, take back control Tuesdays. Wednesday webinars are really great. But I basically, I was just filling every time. Rather than listening to music while I'm doing construction, I started listening to books and
Yeah.
webinars. Yeah, doing monotonous stuff, I can listen and learn a lot. So that's how it started. And so it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, like I said, I never thought this would be the route I'd go, but I've kind of been open to the universe. I've kind of been like, I'm ready for the unexpected. And if this brings value to people, and I do believe it will, the big target audience that I'd like to work with are people a lot like me, that are in many ways just haven't been taught how to work with money, how money works. Maybe have fallen into the trap of, more income, more expenses you have. And Nelson Naff wrote Becoming a Banker, talks about Parkinson's law, and that's definitely a trap I've been in. Uh, and yeah, business owners and families and anybody, farmers. I mean, this weekend I thought about farmers, and I'm like, man, I have some family that own farmland in the Midwest, and they don't farm it. The same family has farmed it for generations. And for them, if they understood how to finance all the equipment and all of the things that they have to finance rather than working with institutions and bleeding out interest. So yeah, in some ways I'm an open book, but I'm ready to help anybody that comes my way that wants to learn. And that's what it's about, is spreading that understanding of how to gain back control.
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of ways it comes down to liberty. It comes down to freedom. Our country was founded on, getting out from the under the thumb of tyranny and being free men and women that have the ability to kind of craft our own destiny. And in so many ways, we have lost that. We've become. I mean, the taxation rates that we pay today would have made the Boston Tea Party people just crazy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and in the regulation and the just all the stuff that we're subject to in our modern society. And you can say in many ways life has improved, and in a lot of other ways, it hasn't. One of my projects is I'm writing a book called Age Out Loud, and one of the chapters in the book is the rise and the fall of the Walton's model, and I talk about multi-generational housing and how that used to be the common thing in an agricultural economy, and multiple generations lived in under the same roof, and that was common practice. And the children learn from their grandparents. The young people learn the wisdom and the culture and the understanding and what it meant to be a member of this community and of this culture. And we've lost so much of that. We've lost so much of the wisdom of the ages, and the old people are shuffled off and live over here in a senior living community of one kind or another, and
Yeah.
the young families live over here, and the empty nesters live over here, and it's all segregated. And I think we lose so much from that. And one of the things I think in rural areas, a lot of those traditions tend to hang on.
Yeah.
The passing down from one generation to the next, and the multi-generational living, and some of those tight knit communities. When you live in a small town and everybody knows everybody, and you tend to help each other. That image of like the Amish barn raising, or that kind of event where the whole community comes together to help out a family that's maybe had a difficult time, or something has befallen them. Um,
Yeah, and that's a
I don't.
big reason why we stayed here, raising our kids in the community where that everybody's looking after your kids because it's just the way it is. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's not like a traditional Amish community, but I mean, if somebody's on the side of the road, you pull over. You don't you don't go, oh, I don't like that guy, or I don't know that guy, or maybe that person's bad, or oh, you pull over and somebody's house burns down, everybody's there. Everybody's there
Right.
to help rebuild, throw fundraisers. But yeah, and as it relates to multi-general housing, I recently wrote a post about that. It's probably a whole nother subject of how this kind of financial strategy can support you as you age. It really is a very, very big component of the retirement or the later years is something that can be used throughout your lifetime as you age. And it can actually, if it's properly utilized and built up, you can actually use some of that money and supplement your income. And there are certain riders that you can add on to a certain policy to support you with, like, I guess, just long-term care, kind of the things that you can add on. But just this style of strategy to what's also known as the infinite banking concept by Nelson Nash, he kind of coined it that. Um, it can be used in any way. That's why, I mean, infinite, the word means anything. You can, yeah. So I really love how just out of the box it is, and how it is kind of a secret that has been hidden underground. It's not a hack. It's not a scam. It's not a Ponzi thing. It's for real. But you can't just walk down to any office and get one of these policies. You should get some support in setting it up properly.
So Ryan, for those people that are watching this right now, and this resonates with, and they wanna learn more, how do they go about that?
Well, currently for me, I have information on my LinkedIn page where you can book just an intro call, just to get on the phone and talk, have a conversation. I have an additional link that actually sets you up with a strategy call. And that's when you're hopping on with me and some of my mentors to actually start talking about how what the person's goals are and when and how they want to get things set up. And that's kind of like the beginning stages of actually getting the ball rolling. But I'm open for a conversation anytime. I still personally am doing construction. This afternoon, I'll be built a skirting around a tiny house before the snow falls.
Yeah.
So I'm still doing, a little bit of everything. Um, but I'm opening the door and my schedule is wide open to put my tools down and have a conversation about this with anybody. So I'm hoping for this to take over my construction game. Maybe I'll just be building cabins for myself on my property when things work out.
Yeah, very good. So your LinkedIn page, Ryan Salmon, is the best way for people to get a hold of you.
Yeah, and you're doing the common thing saying salmon, but it is salmon like the fish. The L is
As soon
silent.
as I said that, I was like, I bet I said that wrong.
Yeah, salmon like the fish. Nope.
So that's why you moved to Alaska, where the salmon are.
Funny, I'm just this Scotch Irish guy from the Midwest. I never ate salmon growing up. It was just perch and crappie and walleye. But yeah, somehow I ended up in a place where all 5 Pacific salmon run right out my back door all summer.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love salmon, so
Nice. Yeah, it's a good life up here. Yeah, they can get in touch with me through that. If you want, I can send you that link that you can add to this, or even my phone number.
Yeah, send me the link and whatever you'd like, people to have, and we'll put it in the description, and then people can get a hold of you that way. All right. Well, thanks for being on, Ryan. I really appreciate it, and wish you all the best. And I'm going to have to figure out a way to get up there and get some of the salmon sometime soon.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
I
Take
love
care.
what you're doing, Chris, and keep
All
it
right.
up. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.